recording is in progress. Socialism and elections. It's a discussion debate between NPC, National Political Committee candidates, because our convention is coming up, and this is an important strategic question that a lot of people debate, sometimes online, better, oftentimes not online. And so with no further ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers, and then I'll explain the basic structure of the discussion, and then we will get straight into it. So want to introduce our 9 speakers. We have Aaron Berger, joins us from Maine DSA and is a member of local Lighthouse Caucus. You can clap out there. Alex Pelletieri joins us from New York City DSA and is a member of Bread and Roses. Alexander Hernandez joins us from Pasco Hernando County DSA and is a member of North Star. Amy Wilhelm joins us from Seattle DSA and is a member of Marxist Unity Group. Grace Mauser joins us from New York City DSA and is a member of Socialist Majority. Jorge Rocha, or I don't know how you pronounce it, Rocha. Sorry, Jorge. Joins us from New York City DSA and is a member of Emerge. Philip Locker joins us from Seattle DSA and is a member of Reform and Revolution. Rose Dubois joins us from Maine DSA and is running with the Groundwork slate. Sam Heft-Leffy joins us from DSA SF and is a member of Red Star. Apologies for any mispronunciations, my bad. So the framework is pretty straightforward. We've got 90 minutes total. We've got 9 panelists, so we're going to try to keep it moving. Basically, we've got 4 questions that we sent to all of the panelists ahead of time. They could choose 3 to talk about, so it's their choice. They know which ones they're going to go to. That's just to save time. They have 2.5 minutes each. They'll get a time reminder, and we'll ask everyone to be very disciplined. And then we'll have a closing section in which everyone gets 2 minutes to respond, and people can also respond in earlier sections if they so choose. So with that being said, let's go straight into it so we can hear from our lovely NPC candidates. The first question is, what are the best practical examples of electoral work you've been involved with that demonstrate what a socialist electoral project should look like, and what are the next steps DSA should take to move towards building a stronger electoral program? Okay, Aaron, start us off.
Love to go first. What if you could pass laws by plebiscite or like ballot questions? What if there was a rule that said you couldn't change those laws 5 years after you passed them? That is the conditions we have in Portland, Maine. And we got to sort of jump into the future to see what happens after you get to pass some of your dream policies. I'm going to talk about when we passed hazard pay, which was time and a half for all workers while the city was under a state of emergency, so during COVID. And so basically the minimum hazard pay was scheduled to be about $18 an hour in 2021 and would have increased to $18.50 in 2022. Unfortunately, the city found a legal interpretation that said the hazard pay did not start till 2022. We immediately found a DSA member working at Whole Foods to file a class action lawsuit saying Amazon wasn't following the law. And suddenly bosses had to decide for themselves. Did they think the city was right or wrong? If the city was wrong, workers would have been able to sue their bosses for up to triple times the amount of missing pay. That would have been like $54 or something. A lot of businesses, $54 an hour. Court case is going to take a couple of months. A lot of businesses ended up voluntarily complying with the hazard pay ordinance. And it caused a lot of confusion for workers. They were hearing about their friends suddenly getting $18 an hour because of a law passed. Usually the liberal law and order mentality can be very frustrating to deal with, but in this moment, it actually made a lot of workers just immediately hate their bosses for breaking the law. Some even started organizing walks on the boss to demand hazard pay. Some were reaching out to our chapter to figure out what to do, but we were not ready. We were in the middle of planning our next campaign. We had a whole other lawsuit dealing with rent control. And we just did not have the know-how to handle the labor problems that were coming at us. In the end, the court decided that the city was correct, and the moment passed. DSA doesn't just have to pick winnable fights. We have to plan to win and be ready for the responsibilities that victory brings to ensure the laws we pass do actually
That's
affect
fine,
people's
Cameron.
lives.
Okay, Grace, go ahead.
Thanks. So one of the most challenging and rewarding experiences I've had as an organizer was being part of the 2020 New York City state slate, where we ran one incumbent and 5 insurgents, and they all won. I was so excited to be part of that, both as Jari Brisport's deputy campaign manager and also the fundraising coordinator for the slate. Several lessons came out of this that I think are replicable for chapters all across the country. One, campaigns should be closely tied to the org and collaborate as a slate. So the campaigns all met together and with DSA on a weekly basis. This collaboration laid the foundation we needed for a successful Socialist in Office committee. 2, campaigns need to really value the skills of organizers. Some hierarchy is necessary in a campaign structure, but any DSA campaign is necessarily built on the ethos that everyone is smart and capable. So we need the structures in place to teach skills for people need to be organizers, and also to escalate people as they seek to become leaders in the campaign. Third, robust field is necessary. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but the best tool we have to be capitalists is people power. It turns people into organizers and gets us talking to neighbors and in the community. Fourth is where platforms and communications that were built on DSA priorities, but allowed flexibility for candidates and district differences. And that was really important to have that flexibility, but also a core of things that we hit on over and over again. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, is continued support for these candidates after a victory is achieved. Candidates, once they win, have no institutional support from these bodies they're going into. Speakers don't want to help them. City councils don't want to help them. DSA was able to fill that void and give them support on staffing. And this working together was really important for achieving a successful Socialist in Office committee. So some big takeaways from that, and what I want to see us do, are to focus on races where DSA can be a determinative factor and a candidate is committed to organizing with us, and also to use these lessons to build successful SIOs. And I think that's my time. Thanks.
Thanks, Grace. Alexander, and then Rose next.
Oh, thank you, Eric, and thank you, SMC, for hosting this. So yeah, off the cuff here on this one, I want to start out by something I'm probably going to repeat a lot, and need to drive it home, that our primary goal should be to defeat the reactionary, neo-conservative, Christian, patriarchal, authoritarian right, and everything else is secondary. And that really helped me and folks in my chapter in Hernando County, Florida, 36-64 Trump district, right? And what we did here against right-wing forces, Moms for Liberty, DeSantis folks, is we hooked up with the other organized force that exists here, the teachers union. I'm really excited, glad to see that we're taking up questions about down ballot this convention, which we didn't last time around. And that's crucial. Those down ballot elections are where we're gonna need to turn out in 2024, regardless of who's at the top of the ticket. And we need to be part of the anti-fascist forces. And that's what's ultimately going to win. We can't do it alone, and we can't leave it to the Democrats. The stakes are too high. So what we did is we hooked up with the teachers union, effectively used up our 4,000 a month or a quarter allocated text to text bank and get out the vote with them. We were able to do this. Any chapter can do this if you want to use your allocated text that you have for your chapter. That was a quick way to build a lot of solidarity and unity with the teachers union. We're at a point now where we have probably quarterly check-ins. At least once a quarter, we try to check in with the teachers union, the president here in Hernando Teachers Association. Hernando Classroom Teachers Association. Want to get that right. And that's going to be how we build up, because we're a chapter of 41 people that we're trying to build up, get folks to know how to organize, because it's folks who've never done it before, aside from myself out of this group. And I'm bringing in the lessons that I learned from Atlanta on the Bernie campaign and other campaigns from before. But it's got to be crystal clear. We know who the enemy is. It's that right-wing authoritarian right that's rising, that's about to entrench in power. And we can't stick our heads in the sand and ignore what's right in front of us. Thank you.
Thanks. Rose, go ahead. Then Alex.
Yeah, thanks. So like Aaron, I'm going to talk about main DSA ballot questions because we love them here. And the first one I want to talk about is our public power campaign. So I've been one of the organizers involved in that for a while. And basically, we're part of a coalition to pass a statewide public electric utility, which is an issue that resonates with a lot of working class people here. But importantly, on top of the actual policy itself, is that our chapter really used the campaign to develop our electoral program. So for example, we had never canvassed before working on this. And so we really used it to kind of like iron out the fundamentals of a field program, things like bringing in new members, organizing in new parts of the state because we're a statewide organization. So just really using the campaign to build our chapter. The second one I want to talk about is our No on A campaign, which I was the chair of. And so we passed rent control in 2020, strengthened it in 2022. And this past spring, our local landlords were working to basically gut it. And we defeated them, getting 67% of the vote. And that was entirely through DSA. And I think that really speaks to the progress that our chapter had made. People in Portland really identify DSA and rent control. We passed it. It's entirely like our issue. And they support us because of that and want to like be involved in DSA as a result because they know that it improves their lives. And so many tenants showed up to the polls with our lit and were saying they're going to vote no because that's what the socialists told them to do. But our opposition knows it too. We infamously had yes on A to defeat DSA signs all over Portland. And that all was really only possible because we built our chapter over like many, many cycles. And now that that's in place, we're looking to go further and start to like run cadre candidates for office. So in terms of, I think, overall next steps for the organization, I think the main thing is helping more chapters through that process of development and providing them the tools that they need to do it so that we can continue to see more chapters having the muscle to really be able to launch their own campaigns, their own efforts, and have the infrastructure that we need to really build a mass socialist organization. Thanks.
Thanks, Rose. Alex, you're up.
Hey, comrades. So in 2020, I served as the campaign manager for New York City endorsed Assembly member Marcela Mateñas, and along with my comrade Grace, helped elect 5 new socialists in New York City. And then after that, I served on the New York City Socialist in Office Committee, which is the coordinating body between New York City DSA and our elected officials. And these insights gave me, these experiences gave me a lot of insights into how DSA has achieved many of our successes, such as being able to defeat entrenched incumbents in electoral campaigns and form lasting relationships with our endorsed candidates. But it also gave me a lot of insights into how our work should be improved. And it solidified the idea in me that an independent workers' party is necessary for winning socialism. So a lot of people say that they want to build an independent party, but there's not really a clear consensus on how we achieve that goal. And I think that our immediate task is to use elections to raise political consciousness and build a base for this independent workers' party, and ultimately turn DSA into a party-like organization. And electing socialist politicians without having a clear orientation towards party building, in my opinion, is not as effective, because without a mass socialist base, we will always be in a weaker position than our class enemies. So this means that we have to have our own base of volunteers, donors, and campaign staffers, and people who will vote for our candidates for the explicit reason that they identify as socialists. It means setting up socialist in office committees around the country so that DSA chapters can have a relationship with elected officials beyond election day, and setting clear expectations of discipline and accountability for the people we endorse, And it means creating an independent socialist identity and developing a base of people who will vote for us because we're socialists. And I hope to use my experience as a campaign manager, as someone who helped build New York City DSA's infrastructure to help achieve these goals at a national level.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Go ahead, Sam.
Hi, everybody. Sam Heft-Luthi. It's a hard one. Swiss German, we think. I want to thank Socialist Majority for putting this together. San Francisco helps answer the question, what if not only could you do plebiscites, but you also had to know who like David Sachs and Gary Tan were because they were spending like $10 million against you. In San Francisco, I joined the chapter through the ballot measure campaign work that San Francisco was doing in 2018, was kind of a perennial member at large through a lot of 2018 and 2019. And then ended up on a role on the steering committee of California steering committee of San Francisco DSA in 2020. I was part of a process to help refound our electoral work in San Francisco on the basis of a lot of the things we've been talking about today, building an independent socialist identity, connecting more strongly to the chapter, and actually putting the chapter's politics forward in our electoral work. The initial result of that, the first campaign that we ran under that new strategy, was our People First San Francisco campaign, which was based on the work the name created out in Maine DSA, adopted across the country. We considered other stuff, and we liked it too much. And that campaign ended up failing to win money for our city college, but we succeeded in winning a residential vacancy tax and moving odd year elections to even years, even though our mayor called it a Democratic Socialist power grab. I helped found the campaign as steering committee leadership, and then helped run the slate infrastructure that was coordinating the different campaigns. One thing that we really focused on was running a campaign of a new type, right? Being able to use campaign infrastructure, not just to build the campaign itself, but to build a better understanding of socialism with the campaign. Eric here was actually on a panel that we organized that was helping tie the work we were doing to move city elections to even years to the broader context of the socialist fight for democracy through history. I think in a lot of ways, electoral politics can create kind of a tactical drift where we move away from really putting our socialist politics forwards. And as Alex is saying, it's only a militant and ardent socialist workers' party that can actually make sure that we don't follow that tactical drift and put socialist politics forward, which is what I'm really excited to be able to hash out some stuff that'll do at the next convention this weekend. And I would really be excited to bring to the National Political Committee.
Thanks, Sam. Philip, go ahead.
Sure. Well, my most in-depth electoral experience was with the Shama Sawant campaigns in 2013 and 2015, both of which I served as political director of. And that was she was the first socialist elected in Seattle in 100 years with 95,000 votes in a citywide race. And I look towards it as a strong example of what class struggle elections should look like. We really used the election victory as a platform to build class struggle, urging workers to get organized and fight to win the program we were elected for. So, for example, immediately after the election in 2013, we launched 15 Now. It was a grassroots campaign and built a movement around pressuring the city government, but also organizing our own ballot initiative for a strong $15 an hour minimum wage rather than the various watered down loopholes that the establishment was trying to pass. And we succeeded in winning the first $15 in a major US city. And I'm proud to say today, due to the annual cost of living agreement we won, the minimum wage today stands at $18.69 in Seattle, and it's spread obviously across the country, but also to other nearby cities. Seattle DSA is actively working on that. And that was won not through convincing the rest of the city council. When Sawant was elected, literally every other council member, including the left council members, said they were against $15 minimum wage. It was too high. Within 7 months, it passed unanimously. And the reason was through a class struggle approach. It was and the understanding that to win radical change in the interests of the exploited and oppressed is a function, first and foremost, of the level of consciousness, organization, and determination to struggle of workers and poor people. And the role of socialist electeds is to see that as their number one task to build that. These campaigns had a national impact and helped spearhead the resurgence of socialist electoral politics that we're talking about today. I would note, obviously, for comrades who followed it, I do think following the growth of DSA, I think Sawant increasingly adopted a sectarian approach. And I joined DSA to be an active part in building a mass socialist organization. Though at the same time, I think revolutionary Marxists need to be organized as a distinct wing to make sure we avoid the dangers of reformism and sectarian pitfalls.
Great, thanks everybody. I will just say before the next question that I was derelict as MC, and I forgot to actually note and thank Socialist Majority Caucus for hosting this event. So my other panelists beat me to it, and so SMC people can be mad at me afterwards. I had to cover my left flank. Next question. A pressing priority for DSA is expanding our social base, especially into working class communities of color. How can we deploy our work in the electoral arena to build a more diverse working class base for socialist politics? Aaron, start us off.
I want to see the dice where I get to go first twice. I don't really believe it.
Random.org.
I would be cautious about saying the path to building a multiracial working class starts with the citizenship of the United States, that we can only organize with folks who can vote. In Maine, at least, many of the peoples of color are asylum seekers who cannot vote. Now, that might be a struggle that we can enter. We can fight for the right for residents to vote. We've done it twice, and we've attempted it twice in Portland, and it can get really dicey. You definitely want to make sure you're doing it in coordination, because there will be a lot of fear mongering about how ICE will use voting rolls to deport people. You could try to focus on the laws that you pass, bringing material change, but we don't want to make DSA into like a service provider. Like, it's not that DSA goes and does good stuff. It's that we want the multiracial working class to be a part of DSA. We are a socialist organization. We want everyone who dreams of liberation to organize with us. So ultimately, I think one of the most beneficial things DSA should focus on in the next couple of years is language learning classes. Oftentimes, power comes from relationships, and language barriers are one of the #1 ways we can't form those relationships. I think it could assist both our electoral activity as well as our labor and tenant organizing. And I think national organization is really the perfect vehicle to bring sort of expertise and interested folks together to really focus on doing this sort of work. I think DSA is filled with amateurs who taught themselves to do many amazing things, and I have no doubt that DSA members are all capable of learning a second language. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, so we can do this by merging the socialist electoral movement and the labor movement. And our goal should not just be to get union leadership to endorse our candidates, although of course we're not opposed to that. Our goal should be to get rank and file members of unions to realize that their interests are aligned with socialist ideology, and that socialists capturing state power is necessary for their liberation. And Bread and Roses supports the rank and file strategy to do just that. So we have lots of DSA members who industrialize, and they should work with DSA endorsed campaigns to recruit their coworkers to canvass, or maybe even run for office one day. DSA candidates and elected officials should devote their office resources to support worker organizing and strikes. And our candidates and elected officials should constantly be speaking about how the Democratic Party has failed the labor movement and how they will never have the interests of workers in mind. And there was once a time in American history where the socialist and labor movements were nearly indistinguishable. And I think if in this upcoming election, we can elect people with a rank and file labor orientation and an electoral orientation geared towards political independence, we can have that once again.
Thanks, Alex. Sam, go ahead.
So we know that people of color and working people in general, but particularly people of color through the history of the United States, have been systematically disenfranchised from political life. We're standing here now in the wreckage of the 20th century, the failures of a mass socialist movement, and needing to pick up the pieces. I mean, I think there's really two pieces that I want to talk about that are core to that point of developing a social base and how they relate to our electoral strategy. So the first piece is something that Red Star has really been pushing, which is the need for mass protagonism. So for folks who haven't had a chance to read in our newest issue of Zenith, which is our quarterly publication, two pieces from our other NPC candidates about some topics relating to this. The idea that we're actually using our campaigns and tying them with our efforts across arenas of struggle to build DSA as the sort of center for a working class movement. So being able to, do base building work like strategic mutual aid directly in the communities where we're going to be contesting elections, using stuff like the Emergency Worker Organizing Committee, the Emergency Tenant Organizing Committee, to be able to identify strong working class leaders that we can take out of the workplace and bring to the arena of politics to contest working class politics at the political level as well. We need to be able to be doing those, that building of mass protagonism through the campaigns that we're doing and tying our electoral work into that. At the same time, in addition to that tactic, we also can't underestimate the core point of the socialist strategy, that out and ardent socialist politics can break through that depoliticization. This is something that we've seen across the country, where ardent socialist politics, being able to actually develop a campaign of talking to people about socialism, about why our candidates are socialists and what that means for the communities that they're hoping to represent, can actually win. Campaigns like Richie Floyd's in St. Pete, where the deck is so actively stacked against socialists, literally structurally, they demonstrate that we don't need to hide our socialist politics or worry about, targeting to some perceived standard of what we think people are going to say at the doors. We have to be out with our politics and advocate for a better socialist path forward.
Thanks. Alexander, you're next.
All right. So forgive me while I polemicize a little bit on this one. I think some of the answers were a little revealing. There's one thing that we really don't, we're very keen on the labor movement, right? That's across the organization, which is at 10% or so, right? Currently of the workforce, but we ignore all the social movements. There is a Black socialist movement. There's a Latino socialist movement. There is, there's socialist movement in every community, and they're not necessarily within the tent currently. And one big thing I think that is essential, particularly Latinos, speaking in their language. That's why one of my priorities is to orient towards Latino communities and make it a priority to get finally Latino Socialistas off the ground, a publication that should have existed 20 years ago. If we're not talking to folks in their language, they're not going to listen. I know Eric, he wrote about what they did at Amazon, and they spoke to the different immigrants coming in their languages. That's something we need to look at and take that lesson. On the sort of idea of, in a couple of responses, I mean, Richie Floyd hooked up with the Dream Defenders as well. So we're not doing it alone. And these are leaders in the Black community here in Florida. And also on the whole protagonist idea, I really think folks need to read Bill Fletcher Jr. and Modern Tecumseh. Modern Tecumseh is what the forces, the unifying forces that we need. With this group right here, all 9, however many are on this call, we are the Modern Tecumsehs in so many ways, as we have taken up on this, we were asked, whatever reason we ended up here, but that's sort of ties because it's that same struggle, the authoritarian right that is going to screw us all if we don't really pay attention to it. And frankly, I'm the only one who's mentioned that so far. So come on, folks, it's real. And we're on the verge of getting rocked if we don't pay attention. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexander. Amy, you're up.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that we can do is show that we're different from business as usual. When we talk about our in the electoral arena specifically, we have to show that we're different from the kind of business as usual, both Republicans and Democrats. Because the fact is, neither of them offer real path for input. We have to show that DSA is a real way that people, that workers can get involved and have what they want to say actually matter. I think that, the example of, when we talk about ballot initiatives, the example of resident right to vote, that's a really exciting idea. That's something I'd like to fight for. Very interested to talk about, like, how, issues that come up with that. I'd love to learn from that. But when we talk about, elected officials, we have to show that our electeds aren't going to be, again, business as usual Democrats that will make promises and turn around and break them. We have to show that supporting DSA means something. When you vote for a DSA candidate, you're voting for the DSA platform and the DSA positions. And to me, that's something that's really important. The party-like electoral strategy amendment, which hopefully will approve the cross-caucus agenda that puts that back on the agenda for convention. But also something that we need to do is we need to use, when we hold office, we're not just there to win reforms, not just there to alleviate conditions. Holding office needs to be a way to materially and discursively support working class movements. I actually have to agree with Alexander here. That can't just be labor. It can't just be labor, can't just be tenants, can't just be things that we already see as, these are things that are hitting, these are things that are, striking kind of that boundary across classes. We need to understand to include everything from, a spontaneous working class market to things, even the more direct conflict with police, or even things that are just looking to address violence in the community. The fact is that socialists have a solution for that you won't hear from. You won't hear from other NGOs. You won't hear from liberals running for office. The merger formula, as I'd put it, that we talk about a lot with Mug, is socialists and the worker movement, and that's the worker movement in all forms. And that's how our electoral work needs to synergize with other movements. We need to bring what it means to be a socialist, to support socialists, to fight for all workers.
Thanks, Amy. Jorge.
Everyone, thanks so much to SMC for putting this panel on. Now, if I remember correctly, the question was about the electoral arena. I fear a lot of people are talking around it, and I think we should head it face on. As a person of color, I can tell you why I came to DSA, and it's because of AOC. The first time I ever was involved with any political organizing in my life was when I canvassed for AOC. I think it's important that we recognize the importance of having people like her be socialists. I know, for example, my mother, who doesn't speak English that well, but one of the smartest people I know, she never considered to be a socialist because of Bernie. Rather, it was, but because of AOC being a very prominent Latina socialist in office, she considered a philosophy that she had never once considered before. And now she's very far to the left. She could join Emerge today. That's in terms of her politics. And I think we have to recognize that the United States as a country is one of the most diverse countries in the world. There are immigrants from almost every country on earth that are here in the United States. So this is why, in terms of our electoral campaigns, not only should our candidates be people of color, we should also run electoral campaigns that have internationalism at the center of it. And I agree with Alexander in terms of we should have, Spanish language and other languages be at the forefront in terms of any kind of literature and any kind of campaign literature that is pushing our electors forward. And so for us to be able to better understand the plight and the struggle of many working class people in this country, we have to understand where they're coming from, what country they're leaving, and help them understand that, in fact, it's all one struggle, which is class struggle.
Thanks, Jorge. And if we do this in 2 years, we will ask if you've actually, in fact, recruited your mom to Emerge. So you have an organizing task. Grace, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm going to be a little more tactical in my answer here. People of color in the working class won't just flock to socialist ideas. They've heard of socialism. We have to actually actively organize them in order to bring them into DSA and to the socialist left. So with that in mind, four thoughts here. One, we need to choose races with significant working class and people of color populations where we can win. In New York City, we have a really great research program. We have we call them district dossiers, where we assess demographics and the history of voting for left candidates. I think this is really replicable in chapters across the country and will help us be strategic about where we're fighting. Second, we should choose candidates that have strong community ties with working class communities of color outside of DSA. So a lot is made of a magical cadre candidate, and these candidates can and are often really, really great. But it can often be better to choose candidates that actually have strong ties to communities that DSA doesn't already have access to. If a candidate's home is DSA, most of their circle, their organizing political circle, is probably DSA too. We need candidates who have really strong ties with, large public housing units, large apartment buildings, church communities that we don't already have a strong presence in, parent teachers associations. These are really, really great candidates that should be seriously considered. We also need to work in coalition with organizations that are led by working class people of color. Electoral campaigns aren't won all by ourselves usually. Endorsement opportunities for candidates are a chance to build a relationship with other orgs, and this is really important. And then finally, and this may be really obvious, but we need to win. Winning races is super hard, and when you run to win, you have to spend more time chasing votes than actively recruiting into DSA. But when a candidate wins, they can use their office and their resources to do that deeper recruitment work that we really, really want in the communities that we want to build in.
Thanks, Grace. And thanks to everyone, panelists so far, for being very diligent on time. We're actually doing pretty well on time, so we're going to stick to the time limit, but I think we're going to have a little bit more time for responses afterwards. So be prepared. You'll have probably a little bit more time to respond. Third question: what strategic lessons do you think DSA should draw from the experience of the Bernie campaigns in 2016 and 2020? I'm going to start off with Aaron again. I'm just kidding. Philip, go ahead.
You're on quite an Aaron roll. Threw me for a loop there. Yeah, I think there's two key lessons I want to talk about. I think Sanders, number one, ran an insurgent, oppositional, anti-establishment campaigns. Let's remember his main slogan was for a political revolution against the billionaire class. He unabashedly owned his radical fighting demands like Medicare for all, tuition-free college, Green New Deal, money for jobs and education, not incarceration, canceling student debt. And today, I think, though, in contrast, I think our DSA electeds have tended to lose some of that edge. And that's, in my view, an expression of the pressure of accommodating to the ruling Democrats with Biden in power. And they've moved away from a more militant oppositional stance that we saw AOC and others have when she was first elected, towards becoming a more loyal opposition. The radical demands that Sanders, AOC, and DSA gained huge support around between 2016 and 2020, they faded a little bit to the background and were been replaced with a focus on passing more left-wing elements of Biden's agenda. And that represents a lowering of our horizons with the Democrats in power. The other key lesson I would draw from Bernie's two campaigns is looking at why did DSA and not our revolution grow to be the center of gravity of left-wing electoral politics? Let's remember that Bernie was the one who, he was leading the charge. He launched our revolution, and that was the main organization he promoted, not DSA. But it was actually DSA that was the main beneficiary during that time. Why was that? I think DSA was attractive because it was seen as a member-run organization, whereas our revolution had a top-down character which lacked democratic structures. It's basically an email list for a few leaders to send announcements and say, donate here, vote for these candidates. DSA was boldly identified, used the dirty S word, socialism, that it wanted fundamental change. Our revolution does not. And number three, it was an activist organization, combining electoral work with building radical movements in the streets. And I think we need to return to those strengths. I think we've been losing that edge and our membership is falling. We need to return to that kind of radical campaigning socialist edge in this coming period.
Thanks, Philip. Sam, go ahead.
Yes, so as Philip said, we know that we from the Bernie experience, we've seen the way in which like strong oppositional campaigns can really galvanize and inspire people. I think that's, to me, just the core heart of the lesson. And, my emotional arc through the Sanders campaigns was that recognition. I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that I personally think might be interesting to apply from that, from the campaign. So I think one piece that I think we really need to learn from the Sanders campaign is how to lose better. I think one thing that I think about the Sanders campaign is they lost in a bad way. We should be running to win our campaigns. We should be running to use the levers of power that we can get. We need to run our campaigns in a way that if we don't win, that we've still moved the movement forward. And I think in a lot of ways, Sanders lost, and the way that he liquidated the infrastructure that he was building into the Democratic Party establishment, everybody's getting their texts from the donations that they gave to the Sanders campaign. I think that was bad. I think another thing for me that I think a lot about is just the tactics of choosing candidates. And I think when you look at sort of Sanders 2016 versus 2020, when you have like a clear oppositional candidate that isn't very popular, you can go pretty far, right? You can actually articulate like your differences in a major way. And I think trying to figure out how to navigate that crowded field of 2020, I think was very difficult. As far as the broader strategic piece, Red Star has written a lot about what we've called the flag, that different socialist movements have been planting flags to, articulate the vision going forward for socialist power, right? Whether it's the Paris Commune, the all power to the Soviets, the Democratic Republic, if you're at the Marxist Unity Group, I think has been a really useful intervention in that. I think for a little while, the Sanders campaign was the flag for the left. And I think that was able to be something that could carry the movement forward, but the flag has collapsed. And I think really, as we're figuring out what to do to build socialist politics post-2020, we need to figure out what that flag is and how to advance that banner more highly than Sanders was able to do.
Thanks, Sam. Go ahead, Rose.
Yeah, I mean, I think that our participation in the Bernie campaign was really key for DSA's development early on. And I mean, I just know that for myself, the Bernie campaign, knocking doors with DSA down in Philly, was the first time I'd done any kind of electoral politics before. And I know that's the case for so many members and so many chapters as well. So I think that that's really important. I would say that one of the biggest things is that through Bernie, we gained tons of members, and a lot of people were activated as socialists because of the vision that he'd offered to people. I would disagree slightly. I don't think it was like the fact of him being oppositional. I think it was rather like the program he put forward that people really believed in. So whether that was Medicare for all or student loans or like whatever issue inspired people to want to participate because they really believed that it was going to improve their lives and just like, give them a reason to spend hours and hours knocking doors or making texts or whatever. And I think that kind of speaks to what we need to be doing as an organization. So whether it's rent control, like it's here in Portland, or minimum wage, or like whatever issue you're kind of working on, I think it's really important that it's connecting with working class people's material reality. And obviously those things kind of aren't our end goal of socialism, but we can use them to develop our base, build connections with the working class, and really start to bring people into DSA and use those to also connect to socialism as well. I also think that it's not a coincidence that we had a huge revival of the socialist movement, coinciding with people really believing that we could actually elect a socialist, to be president. And I think that is really important. Like, I remember after the Nevada primary, like really believing we were going to win. And I think that we need to replicate that by focusing on campaigns that really, we think we can win. It doesn't mean they have to always win, but it's important that we like generate that feeling in people, because otherwise they're not going to want to knock doors.
Jorge, you're up.
Thank you. Facing stiff opposition from the Democratic Party establishment, hostile corporate media, and bureaucratic union leaders, the Sanders campaign had a vibrant working class base of supporters, but insufficient organizational and institutional strength. To win either in the electoral arena and outside of it, the working class base will need to get organized, expanding existing institutions and building new ones. We, as leaders in DSA or rank and file members, we all should be participating in building working class institutions. Yes, we need to be running campaigns. Yes, we need to be running even a stronger, better, more vibrant electoral campaigns, but there also needs to be independent working class organizations such as labor unions, tenant unions. You know, part of the task as socialists in the United States, ever since the election of Ronald Reagan and neoliberalism being triumphant, community in the United States has been deteriorated to the point of being non-existent. Part of our task is we must build community. We must recreate the social fabric that was once existed in this country. So that really comes down to even third places in terms of people being somewhere outside of just their home and work. People have to believe, we have to make people believe in actuality, the reality of what would be the collective life, that there is actually another alternative to the way we live our lives. So with respect to Bernie, his campaign has been credited with reviving the socialist movement, but it's also important that this didn't happen just out of thin air. He rode a rising tide of social movements, such as like the anti-globalization protests, the movement for Black Lives, indigenous resistance to Standing Rock, you know, movement against the Iraq War, Occupy Wall Street. But we must also remember that, yes, Bernie Sanders running for president, as Rose just mentioned, yes, it made people believe that there being a socialist in office is possible. So what is the most important lesson? Don't give up. Look at Evo Morales. He lost in 2002, won in 2005. Look at AMLO, took 3 times to be president. And Lula took 4 times running a campaign consecutively until he became president of Brazil.
Thanks, Jorge. Amy, you're up.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely agreement that, you know, the kind of unabashed message of this is what we're fighting for, this is what we want for the working class. I think that was really what got people excited. I think the key to that was a message of class independence and open opposition is as class interests, open opposition to the I think Bernie said the billionaire class, but, you know, the capitalist class as the thing behind all of the standing democratic institutions and everything. One critical thing to learn about, I don't think it's just that there was insufficient organization. Trying to run not just using the Democratic ballot line as we talk about, but trying to run as a Democrat and as a part of the Democratic Party. Like one thing we learned from Bernie, and it's really just proving something that we as socialists already know, the Democratic Party is there to keep us out. And no matter what, like we can be winning and the Democratic Party through its anti-democratic mechanisms will come down and kick us out. So really, I think 2 big things that I want to take away from that. We need to uphold our politics regardless, put forward the message that socialists are fighting for the working class, and it is necessary that like this is against the capitalist class. It's, you know, the 99% are necessarily against the 1% because the 1% are against the rest of us. And we need an independent party. We need to build towards that. And that, again, coming back to, I think the Act Like an Independent Party talks about building infrastructure. I think that's fantastic. And I want to come back again to the party-like electoral strategy amendment that, again, hopefully we will get back on the agenda because that really sets those lines. That says that, you know, in our electoral work, just like Bernie, will be unabashed. We will say that we will be openly socialist. We will put forward our platform and hold candidates to it.
Thanks, Amy. Alex, go ahead.
So yeah, there's a lot of things that we can learn from the Bernie campaign. One thing is that we should continue running candidates on the Democratic ballot line when necessary. I don't think that Bernie would have been able to build the mass movement that he did if he had run as an independent. However, it is possible to run on the Democratic ballot line, but also be very agitational towards party leadership and towards centrist members of that party. And I think that Bernie proved that running a campaign like that can actually boost your viability. Another lesson is that we should say Democratic Socialist a lot. You know, it should be on our literature, it should be on our stump speech, it should be in our canvassing raps. You know, people liked Bernie not just because he said different things, but because he offered a different political vision. And also, you know, leading with democratic socialism will help grow DSA. It will help us develop our own brand and our own socialist identity. And Bernie said several times that he wants to be the organizer in chief. And I think that we should follow suit by running candidates who want to be organizers first and legislators second. Our candidates should not just be in state capitals or in Congress to organize other elected officials to move them a little bit more left, and also they should not try to win power through backroom deals, through not pissing certain people off, through relationships. They try to build power by organizing thousands of people for the socialist movement.
Great, thanks, Alex. Aaron, go ahead.
I'm really glad I didn't go first. I was going to rehash coordinated campaign versus independent expenditure, but we're talking about very different things, I guess. Yeah, this is great. I get to like just respond to everyone. I don't know. Going last is the best. I agree with a lot of things that were said. I think people joined DSA for many different reasons, but many people stayed because of the dream of Bernie 2020. That was the spirit of our national organization, was that campaign that we were moving towards. And now that that is in the rear view mirror, the state of DSA is forever changed. we have to do a lot of different work to reconsider what this organization is doing. But yeah, I think Bernie was the flag and we need to find a replacement. I think we need to rebuild the community so that people are connected. I think Nevada being the place that delivered Bernie his best victory is no mistake, because Nevada has some of the strongest unions in the United States. I also think that this belief that things can change are like vital, but also people believed without any proof. Like it wasn't so much that there was like a record to go on. It was just something in the air. And also it wasn't enough. I ultimately in 2020, people loved the idea of Medicare for all, but were not willing to believe that it was possible. And Bernie was not able to consolidate a majority. And Medicare for all has disappeared since then. So it's not just about the right policies, because like that wasn't the winning ingredient. It's something else, something extra that's on the outside. I am going to talk a little bit about like the tactical stuff. I think about where our field programs were in 2020 and where they are now, and it's like night and day or whatever. Like Maine itself didn't have much of a field program. And so like there's a part of me that is really interested in what how we could have done it better, or like if it was even possible to get prepared. Sorry. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Okay, last question before we have responses from everybody. Cornel West, a former honorary co-chair of DSA, recently announced his candidacy for presidency on the Green Party line, potentially representing the most prominent third-party challenge from the left since the 2000 Nader campaign. Meanwhile, many aligned elected officials, including AOC and Bernie, have endorsed Joe Biden. How should DSA relate to these presidential campaigns? Should DSA make an endorsement? Jorge, you start us off.
Sure. The 20th century provides cautionary tales about the limits of left electoral projects. Socialist and communist parties have across the world been very successful at taking or wielding state power through winning majorities or by embedding themselves in the parliamentary process, but all have been variously restrained or compromised. Once in power, many have administered austerity and acted as conservative forces to have demobilized the working class and contradicted the aims of social movements. If we're going to try to run campaigns for executive office, such as the president or governor or mayor, we have to be prepared for what that responsibility entails. They're not just going to let someone get in that seat again if we make a mistake. We have one shot. So we have to make sure that the legislature will be amenable to the grand transformative socialist transformation of society that this country needs. So we must be very, very careful and very cautious once we do decide to do that. So with someone like Cornel West running, I wish them very luck, but I don't think he's going to win. But also, frankly, we should be very careful about the idea of a socialist winning, because we then have to be prepared to take it to as far as possible that we need to. Because if a socialist president is not able to do the changes that they need to do, then for a whole generation, the talking points, the propaganda will forever be, well, we tried socialism and look how ineffective it was. So we have to look, in my opinion, towards examples of actually existing democratic socialism, that projects have been able to get into power, such as like Bolivia or Brazil. We have to be humble because we have not won, and we have to learn from others. So should DSA make an endorsement? I mean, no. Sorry.
Buried the lead. Thanks, Jorge. Okay, Alexander, you're up.
All right. So on Cornel West, honestly, he should be running for the NPC. And at best, it's a waste of time. And at worst, it's a diversion of the GOP danger, right? But on Biden, we don't have to endorse the guy to take an unequivocal stance against a right-wing patriarchal Christian nationalism. That means, of course, a defeat Trump or whoever campaign. We can't, like in 2020, ignore that threat. It's rising. It's going to be continuing to rise. Our focus, of course, should be, though, down the down ballot elections, where we have folks running, where we encourage that turnout, and where we make sure that we are a part of that force. We can't do. We were criticized by Daniel Ellsberg, funny enough, on that podcast with Colonel West that he had for a while, but we were criticized for supporting Biden clandestinely. For, all of our members were going to vote for the guy, but we weren't going to take the position. And he said, you mean to tell me that the majority isn't it Democratic Socialists, but in the majority wants the guy to win, but you're not taking a position? And he said he can't respect an organization like that. He said he couldn't respect us. That was Daniel Ellsberg. And to me, I want us to draw in the Daniel Ellsbergs of the world over having a correct line. I want to put the organization first before any political faction. And that's my word. I'm not going to, we know some of these factions practice democratic centralism. I'm not going to go back to them and agree to something and then hold the NPC hostage to where we're going to have 8 vacancies. So I'm going on a little bit of tangents, but no, we got to keep our head focused on the enemy, which is outside of the clubhouse, the right-wing Christian nationalists, and that means being a part of that force. And we have to really course correct there. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexander. Keeping it spicy. Philip, go ahead.
Sure. My starting point for this issue is that DSA has been damaged by its electeds being associated with Biden. We've seen a 20% fall in membership since Biden took office. And I think we need, as socialists, to speak to the real working class discontent that exists with the Biden presidency, while also absolutely being crystal clear that we oppose the right-wing demagogy of Donald Trump and his racism and sexism. To do that, we need our political independence to actually be most effective in fighting far-right Republicans so that we can put forward a clear working class agenda. Our ability to fight for a working class agenda is severely compromised if we're associated with, or even worse, endorse Wall Street Democrats. The most important way we need to remember as socialists to fight Trump and the Republicans is to build mass movements and independent working class power. I also believe in a polarized election with a far-right Republican like Trump, I think DSA and DSA electeds should encourage voters in the minority of swing states, which are a small minority of states, to block Trump by tactically voting for Biden with no political illusions, with no endorsement, with no campaigning, as a purely negative vote against Trump. But I think our overall approach should be to endorse Cornel West and focus on campaigning for him. A candidate, he's the only candidate who's going to promote our agenda in the #1 political arena that workers and oppressed people are going to be discussing in the next year and a half. And that's the presidential election. We cannot like that, but that's the reality. The presidential election is going to be the main filter which politics are going to be discussed the next year and a half. And it's in his campaign is an opportunity to build support for anti-racism, trans rights, Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, closing down the Pentagon war machine, and other fighting demands. I think we need to link a campaign for Cornel West with a major national effort to re-elect our DSA Congress members and to build a socialist caucus in Congress that's distinct from the Progressive Caucus, and use it most of all as a campaign to recruit to DSA, to turn around our fallen membership and start growing again. Now, I'm absolutely clear. I understand that the majority of DSA activists, I believe at this point in time, don't agree with my position. I'm under no illusions about that, but I look forward to further discussion and debate in our organization.
Time, comrade.
And I think we can win over a majority of the approach I put forward.
Thanks, Philip. Rose, you're up.
Yeah, I don't really think that we should endorse either of them. I don't really think there's much strategic value in endorsing either. I mean, Cornel West, on the one hand, he's not going to win. And I don't think anyone really believes he's going to win, even his, like, you know, most ardent supporters. But I also think, really importantly, no one, for the most part, knows that he's running. People aren't paying attention to his candidacy in the same way that they were Bernie. And so supporting his candidacy isn't going to help us reach out into the whole mass of you know, working people. But I also think it would be a waste of our resources. So we have very limited time, resources, money, all that. And I think that we should be putting that towards our candidates and our races and our elections, because that's how it's going to be most effectively used, so that we can really build up our organization. Then there's Biden. And as a trans woman, I'm obviously absolutely terrified of the Republicans and what they can do with power. But I also don't think it makes any sense for us to be supporting him. I mean, for one, he's not a socialist, and I don't think that we should be supporting candidates who aren't socialists. I mean, again, for similar resource reasons. And also because I don't think that we should be backing candidates who disagree so intensely with our policies. But also, I think that we would have very little impact on the race because it's a huge federal race. We're a relatively small organization. And I think that there are other much better ways that we can be fighting against the far right. I authored, along with another comrade, Resolution O, which is to run DSA candidates for school boards. And I think that that's a way that we can be fighting against far right forces in our country, while also having a huge impact on the election, and also being able to use those to, you know, push our organizations. And generally, school board races are much smaller, and so chapters with fewer resources are able to engage in them. So I think that that's a much better alternative than trying to, you know, knock doors for Biden when it's going to do nothing, and people, our members, don't want to do it. So it doesn't make any sense.
Thanks, Rose. Grace, you're up.
Thanks. So yeah, I think I'm in line with most of my comrades on the panel that, you know, it would be amazing if Cornel West won, but even if DSA threw 100% of our resources at it, it just isn't going to happen. Basically, we all know that either a Democrat or a Republican is going to win, and we have to respond to the actual material conditions that we find ourselves in. So if we're in the business of dealing with reality, the best outcome for us is, of course, a Biden presidency. It's the best for DSA priorities, and it's also, as Rose was just pointing out, the best for the working class. It's the best for our trans brothers and sisters. It's the best for like all of us, really. Trump or any other Republican would be terrible. So that being said, I really don't think DSA should endorse anyone in the presidential race. We shouldn't endorse West because he won't win, and we shouldn't be in the business of endorsing doomed publicity campaigns. And we shouldn't endorse Biden because he wouldn't be part of our electoral project. And also our endorsement just wouldn't matter at all in that race. Our members are probably going to vote for him against a Republican anyway. We, you know, our turnout machine for Biden would be minuscule. It wouldn't matter. However, we should definitely allow our DSA electeds to endorse Biden. I haven't heard as much discussion about this on the panel so far. Having our DSA electeds endorse Biden furthers our own strategic interests because it's in our interest to have Biden be president. And it allows electeds to signal their opposition to fascism to their colleagues and to their district. And it also opens up opportunities for potential coalition partners. Let's imagine Rashida Tlaib endorsing, as she likely would. If we ask her to toe a DSA line on no endorsement, versus being in solidarity with the Muslims, women, trans people in her district, that would be absolutely ridiculous. We should not condemn Rashida for endorsing Biden, and we shouldn't condemn any of our electeds for doing so.
Great, thanks, Amy. So we've got 22 minutes left. So 22, I'm just doing a little math, 22 divided by 9 is 2.5 minutes, basically. So everyone gets 2.5 minutes. Philip, start us off with the response and our closing remarks.
Don't we have Amy last?
Amy, oh my God, that was not intentional. I'm sorry, Amy. Go ahead, Amy. That was not intentional. Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I guess I got to finish this one up. Yeah, so starting off, I think, we should endorse Biden. That's not really a thing of it won't make a difference. It's a thing of to do so in this leadership. And that's the same coming from our electeds as it would be coming from us. Is Biden better for the working class, for trans people, and so forth? As a trans person, do I prefer Biden to Republican a little bit? At the same time, what's he done? We've gotten something that says no, it's okay. You're allowed to discriminate as long as you can, convince the courts of a reason. Well, I mean, the courts aren't our friends. We shouldn't really tail our electeds anyway. We need to build relationships and expectations with our electeds, so we're not in a situation of having different things. Again, I'm going to go back to the part of electoral strategy amendment that we're all hoping we'll get on the agenda. Speaking of West, it's a really exciting campaign, I think. I mean, absolutely, you're right, it's a doomed publicity campaign. And so the question for DSA, what's in it for us? Obviously, he's not going to win. I don't think there's any question of that. It would be, I'm not sure I agree. It would be great. It would be interesting. Like Jorge has said, we need to look at the history of socialists actually getting in office, winning at least administration of state power, if not actually state power. I think that's kind of the difference where the rubber hits the road. So really, DSA would need to maintain independence from the campaign. We would need to use it as a springboard for our own positions in recruitment. And for that, we need to have an idea of what our positions are, a shared idea of that. And we'd need to, have a more solid idea of what does it mean for us to endorse nationally. And that's something that, although I think we had a pretty effective way of doing that with the Bernie campaign, we had that independent expenditure, we did build DSA off of it. It's not something we've really worked out, really kind of struggled out, what it means to have that kind of endorsement. So I think it could be done well. I don't think that DSA is ready to do such an endorsement. So I'm ambivalent about whether DSA actually should do it. But I think we should definitely use this to keep the discussion going of how we should engage with campaigns like that.
Thanks, Amy. Sorry about that. My bad. Okay, so everyone's going to get 2.5 minutes of response time. Philip, start us off.
I think Grace's answer in the last round, I think, was quite revealing. I wanted to just start with that a little bit. And I think it gets to a little bit the stakes of the choice we're going to make at this national convention. Grace said, which I agree with, that DSA should not endorse Biden, but then went on to say that we should allow, what basically sounds like from the argument she supports, DSA electeds in Congress endorsing Biden. There's, I think, a real contradiction there. We're saying as socialists, we want an electoral strategy where our electeds serve our organization and our movement and act as champions to promote our policies. But on the main political issue in the next year and a half, that the majority of workers who are not super involved, the number one issue of how they're going to evaluate politics are public representatives. The main public face of our organization should be doing something that you think our organization shouldn't do. I'd like you to explain a little bit that contradiction there. And I think in reality, it means you do support endorsing Biden. It's just not viable in DSA, but our main profile, our main representatives have to have the freedom to do what is really needed. I think there is a different course. I think our job as socialists is to carve out a distinct position of, yes, opposing Trump and the Republicans. Let's be clear, that is the greater evil. In a choice between Trump and Biden, we want Biden to win, but we should not endorse him. And our DSA electeds can also say that crystal clear. We're not on Team Biden. We want to champion a working class agenda. We're not going to endorse him. If we're forced to make a choice in swing states like Michigan, I support Rashida Tlaib saying, I don't support Biden. He's not advanced workers' interests, but yes, vote for him to block Trump. In New York, why should AOC have that message? Why doesn't AOC in New York have a message, cast a protest vote against Biden? So the final thing I'll just say flowing from that is, I do think the convention faces a real choice of the direction of DSA. If we're happy with the current direction, which I think Grace summed up well what that applies in the coming period, means to go along with trailing behind Biden, the Democrats, I'm not the candidate to vote for. You should vote for my comrades in SMC and Groundwork. They're going to do a very good job of representing the status quo in DSA. If we want a course correction, if we want to change towards independence from the Democratic Party, I do ask for you to vote for me and my running mate, Jesse Dreyer, and also MUG and BNR and Red Star to have a left-wing majority to change direction of DSA.
Thanks, Philip. Alex, yeah.
Yeah, I want to respond to some of the points that's been made. The far right is absolutely a major concern, but political independence is necessary to defeat them. In fact, you should check out the Bread and Roses resolution, Fighting the Right Through Political Independence. And politics is not a competition between the far left and the far right. It's a war between the working class and the capitalist class. And working class people who vote for right-wing candidates don't exist in a vacuum. They exist because of the dominations and divisions created by the capitalist class. And yes, it's very important that we, of course, win elections. And yes, to do that, we need to elect people who have deep roots in their communities. But we also need to elect people who have an orientation towards political independence. One example is Richie Floyd, who is a DSA-endorsed council member in St. Petersburg, Florida. And before getting elected, he was a community organizer and a rank-and-file teacher, but he is also a proud Bread and Roses member and somebody who supports an independent party. And furthermore, I've heard from tons of my comrades who are Teamsters, who are nurses, who are teachers, that through labor struggles in their workplace, they've introduced their normie coworkers to socialism. Those coworkers have gone on to join DSA, and personally, I hope they run for office one day. So to close, the purpose of our electoral work is to attract people to class struggle, to set workers into motion, and to give them a boost wherever they're fighting, and to raise consciousness about what is possible. People want to fight, and we need to show them that we are the team that fights.
Thanks, Alex. Rose, you're up.
Yeah, I want to respond to a couple of the things, or maybe the general themes that have been kind of emerging here. I think we hear a lot about independence and accountability and discipline, like all these different words. But I think that if we're serious about building our own kind of independent political apparatus, then we actually need a plan to figure out how to lay the foundations for that. And if we just kind of declare that we're an independent party, then we're going to quickly just, dissolve into irrelevance because of the fact that we haven't built up the structures that we need to be able to be pushing our candidates and allowing them to stand on their own two feet. On this question of our congressional electeds and if they should, whatever, they're not going to listen to us, because of the reality, the basic material reality is that we didn't play a large enough role in their election for them to care. And politics is fundamentally all about what you're what leverage you have in the world, what power you have in the world. And if you don't have that power, then whatever ideas you have are completely irrelevant. And so I think that over the next 2 years, we need to be really serious about building up the infrastructure, building up our programs internally so that we can start to develop that further. I think a really key part of that is using all of the national resources that we have to help more chapters develop their own electoral programs so that they can run candidates, run ballot questions, all that good stuff. One really great example is the NEC grants. My chapter benefited tons from those. And I think that we can figure out other ways to be using our resources to help chapters, build up their programs. And I'd also just say to this idea that DSA is failing, I would just say, I mean, DSA is the most successful electoral project, probably socialist one in US history. And I think that's really important. We're winning. We're, passing legislation like DPRA, we're passing things like rent control. People care about our organization because we're changing their lives. And I think that we can continue to work on that. And I would encourage everyone to vote for myself and the other folks on the groundwork slate to continue that project. Thanks.
Thanks, Rose. Alexander.
All right, few things. One, when Bernie's campaign wrapped up, he 100% said join DSA on multiple occasions. Another thing, the crossroads really is, do we want to become a mass political organization, millions, mass politics where it begins, or do we want to become sectarian irrelevance? Down that path. We've seen folks who are trumpeting that sort of sound, right? Discipline, you can only say what the party says, things of that nature. That's not what I want to do. I think DSA needs to continue to be open. DSA needs to be easy to join, hard to get expelled. The sects, they're hard to join, easy to get expelled. Let's not go down that route. Real quick as well, what are you going to do to stop the assaults on people's rights? Insurgent fascists are gaining increased governing power, and very little of it was addressed. Folks are talking about taking over the clubhouse. That's unfortunate because there's a much bigger world and the threat is much bigger. And like I said, they're going to rock us if we don't get our act together. There's something wrong if we don't think that we need to defeat the Republican majorities and end MAGA governing in this country. We are socialists, we are democratic socialists, we are communists. We're supposed to be leading these movements. We're supposed to be cohering them. And we're supposed to be, another thing on movements. Movements are not built, organization is built. Movements are a response to the excesses of capital. And we have to be ready for those excesses and response with organization. So that's one thing that I think, folks, we got to build this. You're not going to build shit because the working class is going to be they're going to liberate themselves. It's going to be the working class. We're going to stand up, and it's not going to be a party. It's not going to be an organization. But we have to be ready and organized for when those moments and those ruptures do occur. And unfortunately, I'm seeing too many people ignore the fascist right-wing authoritarian threat. It's real, and it's more real than any centrist Democrat or anything of that nature right now in this moment. It is the principal threat, the principal enemy, and we need to focus on them going forward, at least for the next 2 years, but it's probably going to be longer. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexander. Jorge.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with Alexander. That is the primary fact of that's facing before us, which, when I announced my candidacy, I decided to announce it on the anniversary of the launch of Operation Barbarossa in World War II, because I think we need to be reminded what are the stakes here in terms of fascism and what must be done to defeat fascism in this country. Yes, liberals are very much a problem in terms of the way they administer neoliberalism, continue and perpetuate an unjust economic system. But in this way, I'm an old-fashioned communist in the sense that I believe in a popular front and a united anti-fascist front, that we must create a coalition that's very broad, people far to our left, anarchists, or even those we consider ultra-leftists, but also to our right of people who are, liberal Democrats. The reason I believe that is because if we don't defeat fascism, something far worse than the current state in our country is about to manifest. And this is why I do not believe we should be endorsing Biden. I do not believe that we should I'm not saying we should necessarily be criticizing every single aspect of the Democratic Party, but we should definitely be very strategic when we do so. The reason I say that is because we fundamentally have to be leading this coalition. We can't be following the Democratic Party. We have to be leading this kind of coalition. And it's why we must be the ones that initiate it, and we must be the ones that lead such a coalition, because once fascism is defeated, I believe we will defeat fascism in this country, then people will remember who fought the hardest. They're going to remember it was the socialists, it was the communists. And do you want proof of that? Look at what happened after World War II globally. There was an increase of socialist parties and communist parties that took power all over the world in the wake of that. And I don't think that's an accident.
Thanks,
And
Jorge. Amy. Oh,
if you-
go ahead. You have time.
If you care about internationalism, be sure to check out the international panel that myself and other people who have been involved in the work will be doing tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern time, 6 p.m. Pacific.
Thanks, Jorge. Amy, you're up.
Yeah, I one thing I want to respond to is talking about, we were talking a lot about non-electoral work on some of this. And the thing is that non-electoral work and electoral work need to work in concert. One thing that I have really appreciated Red Star bringing to the table is the concept of mass protagonism. That's something that has a positive feedback with our electoral work, or can and should, because I mean, Rose is right. Politics is all about power, but the power of the working class is in its majority. The fact that the working class is a majority and can be an organized majority. Absolutely, we need to build organization. We need to build organization. We need to movements will happen. We need to build organization that can be credible to these movements as they emerge. That can bring people in and continue to build the mass protagonists. Ultimately, I mean, talking about our primary mission, the spoiler effect isn't real. I mean, if you have a third party, if you have a socialist that's running, and that's what causes a Democrat to lose, the spoiler is the Democrat who was too fucking boring to get any votes. I mean, that's ultimately the problem. That's the thing that we should be open about, is that socialists have something to offer that Democrats cannot. The thing I want to again bring up a couple amendments. Act like an independent party is already there. I think it's great. It does that work of putting up, building up kind of the institutional power, institutional structures in order to help us run successful electoral campaigns. And I believe that the political question still is really important, though, because if we build that on class collaboration, that's a house built on sand. And we need to lay the groundwork for our electoral work on something more solid. And I believe that's what the party-like electoral strategy offers. It says that this is what the solid base for all of our electoral work is, and this is what we'll build class independence on. So I want to call on any delegates to go ahead and support the cross caucus amended agenda that we're putting forward.
Great, thanks, Amy. You're up, Sam.
Yeah, so I'll first talk about some, pieces that other folks mentioned that I think were really useful interventions. So Jorge talking about the need to build community, right? Institutions of social life that go beyond a particular campaign and can sort of replace the de-socialization of capitalism. I think Alexander's point that we can't do it alone and that we need to also orient to what Harnacker calls the social left. I strongly agree. I think it's really important to not just sort of take an economist stance of like the labor movement is the workers' movement, right? It's a broader thing. At the same time, I think we have trends towards depoliticization and a decrease of socialist politics from that approach, right? We don't want to be joining coalitions that are going to exert control over how we develop messaging, because that doesn't help move the socialist movement forward. It's why we need to be able to tie our electoral work into a strong organizational structure, as well as a political program and political leadership. I think we did a really good thing in 2021, establishing a socialist program, but I think it's been unfortunate that we haven't seen much development in it in the past 2 years. And I think that's something that there's a really big opportunity to be able to push forward. I'll also join in Philip in asking, Grace, it's kind of good you're going last, so you have some thoughts to share. I actually disagree that we should be like seeing members of DSA and DSA itself as being strategically different. That's maybe a reality that we have to own up to, but I don't think it's a good thing. I think it's something that we need to be addressing and building a better path forward. I think it's easy for us to argue that not endorsing Biden for DSA would also be letting vulnerable communities down. I trust socialist politics to articulate a vision of opposition to fascism, opposition to the creeping right authoritarianism that doesn't just involve like a full-throated endorsement of Biden. And I think we need to be building towards all of us speaking with a broad, open, but united voice. I think Red Star's leadership pledge that folks may have heard about is talking a lot about some of the organizational commitments that we'll make. I'm really excited that a lot of folks on this panel have signed on to do stuff like rebuilding a Socialists in Office committee. At the same time, I think in addition to the folks who are signing that basic organizational commitment, to also consider which candidates are going to be able to put forward a political vision that resists those dual issues of irrelevance and co-optation that I think are sort of the two challenges that socialist politics are going to be facing. Thanks.
Thanks, Sam. Aaron?
Man, that was all a lot. I want to talk about something Grace said, but it's not what you think, or it's something a little bit different. Grace talked about how we have to focus on winning because the elected's resources will help the chapter do more recruitment once they are in office. And I think that is absolutely true in New York City, where an assembly maker or assembly member is elected, has a 6-figure salary and 5 staff positions that you could hand off to DSA members. I think there's only one other state with a salary over 6 figures, and there's only 20 states that pay more than $40,000. Probably half of that actually have staff. In most of the country, the state has been starved. It's austere. And when a chapter tries to insert itself, make an intervention in the state politics, instead of securing resources to continue organizing, they find that they have to just invest more capacity to make their intervention even useful. And I think this is like the 6th convention that we've talked about how state legislative seats are a priority for chapters to sort of go into. We think we can express our socialist politics the best at that level. But I feel like I really want to just see, like, we act as if we're all on the same trail and we're all making steady progress in the same way. But there are certain locals that are ahead. And I'm not even sure exactly what it means for Build Public Renewables to pass. If are we going to like pattern bargain this across state legislatives? Like what is the future vision of securing all these wins? I'm really excited that we're winning. I think we are in our best fighting shape ever, but also our analysis is probably the best it's been as well. And we see how much further we have to go. And I hope that we can organize for a hope of a better future and not just focus so much on the worries about how things can go wrong. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Grace, you're up last.
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot to cover here. So I'll start by saying that our electoral project is about winning real socialist power in the real world. We want to win so that we can enact change for the working class in the short term and prove the viability of socialism in the medium and long term. And we shouldn't do things in the short term that undermine this goal. So we have to choose races where we can be determinative in a victory, and the candidate is committed to organizing with DSA. And I'm super open to hearing Aaron's thoughts and critiques about like how instructive New York City can be to other types of chapters. We need to be committed to working with the electeds we have to navigating the hostile and different terrain that they face across the country. And that means entering into good faith organizing relationships with them before we attempt to take punitive action on them. The reality is that electoral is messy, legislating and governing is really messy. And the only way to avoid complexities and complications is to avoid anything that would actually build our power. Bernie knows this. A lot of my comrades on this panel have rightly extolled Bernie's virtues, But if he was fully folded into our electoral project, I'm sure they would be critiquing him. He endorses centrists. He's soft on Israel. He's soft on gun control. He's heavily associated with Biden and has already endorsed him. But we love him because he's serious about power and he makes strategic compromises to get it and to wield it effectively. This thinking needs to be applied internally too. There are obviously bright lines. I'm not saying that everything Bernie does is something we should do, but his strategy is a good one. There's no such thing as a perfect candidate or a perfect elected. There's really only power and there's only organizing to get more of it and to wield it. And we have to organize our elected comrades to expand and wield that power. Now, I'll close by saying that DSA is the most powerful US socialist organization in a century. We have done this over the past several years by being strategic and prepared, not in theory, but in reality. And I'm really excited and proud to be part of this, and I joined because of this. I'm running with SMC because I think what we've done is really fucking cool, and I'm committed to making it better and continuing to grow our power.
Great. Well, I want to thank all of our 9 panelists out there in the world. You can all clap and you give a big solidarity forever in your head or out loud, although we can't hear you. This was actually a really great discussion. I'm sure you all agree that, I think the major debates and agreements came forward. And so I look forward to this continue. I'm glad we resolved all of the problems of humanity and the socialist movement. And so now we can go have a beer or whatever you will together. So have fun. And be comradely to your comrades in Chicago. Everybody have a good rest of the night. Thanks again to Socialist Majority Caucus for hosting, and thanks to all of the caucuses and independents who had their candidates on tonight. Okay, solidarity forever. Long live socialism. Bye, everybody.